How was your day?
It was okay.
So we got a text. Olivia's flight got delayed by 3 hours.
Yeah, I'm at the airport, and this 49-year-old man comes up to me wanting my Instagram and my Facebook, and he's like, I'm single.
Oh, jeez.
Hello and welcome to the Resilient Lineage podcast, where we reflect on the past, anticipate the future, and discover what God is up to today. I'm Olivia.
And I'm a guy who wants to go beat up another 49-year-old man who's hitting on my 19-year-old daughter.
Yeah, it was so weird. But yeah, no, he approached me and he was like, are you, like, I've never flown on a plane before. And I was like, oh, like, not, like, in my head, I'm like, this is a great ministry opportunity. Maybe, like, he doesn't know God, and, like, maybe we can start up conversation. And where the conversation was headed, I was just like, nope.
Has that ever happened to you before?
Being hit on?
Yeah. Like by like an older guy?
But not by, no.
Oh, that's just gross.
Yeah. He was like, I was like, I deleted all my socials for the month.
That's what you told him?
Well, no.
Oh, but that's what you've actually done.
I've actually done that. So he's like, can I have your socials? I was like, well, so I don't have it. He's like, well, just take a photo of mine so when you get it, like, so I have photos.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Of this guy's account.
So
Anyway.
here's the thing. Pro tip to all of you listeners out there. When you don't do that, just like if you are a dude, or I can't even think, I'm really trying to think of a context in which it would ever be appropriate to do that. But so anyway, this is what we're going to do. So we're on the road right now.
We are.
So just to put things in context, a few days ago, my parents flew into Virginia where we live, and they stayed with us a few nights there. And then we drove down together to Durham, North Carolina, where I'm going to Duke Divinity School, showed them around the school there. And then the next day we drove down to Georgia, where your brother, Andrew, is attending Oglethorpe University. And we got here last night and went to a Stormy Petrels baseball game today and watched them win the game, which was fantastic. Yeah. Beautiful day here in Atlanta. And anytime we come into Atlanta, we always hit up
Cousin Lori.
Woohoo! And here she is.
I am so excited.
She is with us today. And we're going to get into who she is here in just a second. But this is the first time we've done the podcast
somewhere else.
Yeah. On the road. And so if you're like, it sounds echoey, it's because we're sitting at Lori's dining room table. She's she's got a lovely home.
You do.
We may hear the ice machine knock down some ice. We actually have a live audience today. So we got your mom and brother and my parents in the room, and so anyway, we're gonna. This is a vibe. This is great. Yeah, this is gonna be fantastic. And we just finished dinner with one another.
I'm excited.
And
to be
so
part of this.
God knows that I don't have a problem sharing more stories and getting excited about what he's up to, and you're the same way.
Exactly, and that's why we're family. I mean, I can tell we have the same bloodline. And now Olivia,
woo, just joining the squad.
Yeah.
All right, so some of you are like, okay, so great, glad you guys are getting together for family. Who's cousin Lori?
Lori? So
let me kind of give you the professional side of the house, and then I want to tell you a personal story about all this. So Lori is. As long as I've known Lori, she has been there's these people you have a chance to know in life that anytime you hear their name, it's always followed by the question, where are they now? Or what have they done now? And that's very much how you have lived your life, is this very aggressive posture towards taking advantage of opportunities, seizing moments, and leaning into what God could be up to. You're not even entirely sure he's up to it, but you're going to find it out. You are, okay, so I pulled this from your website. So I want you to fill in the gaps in case this isn't as complete as it could be. You are a graduate of, I just had it here. You got your doctorate in leadership development from Asbury University.
Correct.
You got your master's of divinity from Fuller Theological Seminary. You're certified in all kinds of different things, so you know what you're talking about and can train through a bunch of different venues. But some of the personality stuff and coaching stuff that I saw, which I thought was really great. You're known for really focusing on leadership and spiritual development. And you started, or led or started, Teach One to Lead One.
Correct.
Which focuses on character development in is it high schools primarily?
Well, we have middle school, high school, and elementary now.
Oh, it's elementary now. Okay, great. So that was kind of like, okay, how do we get to the character of folks? Because that's going to shape the trajectory of their lives.
Exactly.
So that's been a big thing, and that thing has been recognized by the White House. It's been picked up in a variety of school systems. Now I know it's been picked up here in Georgia, right?
Correct.
Where else has it sort of spread throughout the United States?
Well, Milo, we are from coast to coast. From Washington State here, we've been in 13 different countries, and basically it is a character program that focuses on taking the community as mentors into the public schools, and specifically talking about truths that they can live their lives by, but it's also linked to a leadership trait of some kind that they can implement immediately in making a difference in their own peer group.
Yeah, and it's this has been going on for, when did you stand it up?
28 years. I know I look like I'm only 28, but it is 28 years. It started in 1996.
Yeah. Does it seem crazy it's been that long?
I know, it's crazy. And we've reached we're knocking on 70,000 kids.
That's fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a lot of the professional side of the house. We go on and on. You've traveled the world. You've been an international speaker. You've met Mother Teresa 4 different times?
Well, I went there 5 times, met her 4 times.
Okay.
The 5th time she had gone to heaven 3 weeks before I got there.
Okay. Which I imagine was a tremendous...
She really actually is what encouraged me and inspired me to start Teach One to Lead One.
Okay. Wow, that's huge. You are everywhere I see your name pop up, because every now and then you like a sermon of yours will pop up in my YouTube feed. And there's always this high expectation of you're going to hear something with a lot of clarity in a very challenging way and with some very clear action steps for folks to take walking out of whatever setting that is.
Well, thank you.
I share that to say years ago. So rewind the clock back to 1995. I'm looking at my wife. 1996. I'm attending Bible college in Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, and my wife is attending Trevecca Nazarene University in Nashville, Tennessee. And I call your mom and I would chat on the phone maybe once a week. And there was a payphone in our dorm. That's how you pull in. You had the phone card, and so I'm talking to your mom, and your mom goes, "Today, I heard the most incredible speaker." And I was like, "Yeah?" She's like, "Yeah, her name was Lori Salerno." And it was just like, she blew my mind. I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." It's always fun when you hear a motivating speaker. I'm not connecting any dots at all, right? I'm in my own little world. I'm like, "That's great." And so she's going on and on. She's like, "Yeah, and she's got another thing that I'm going to go to with my friend Sue, and we're going to, attend this thing together." And I'm like, "Oh, great." Next day, I'm talking to my mom, your Nana, and my mom goes, "Oh, hey, where's Bethany?" I said, "She's at Trevecca." She's like, "I think Lori, your cousin, is speaking there." Again, I'm not connecting any dots. I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll let Bethany know, and maybe they can connect." And so the next day I call Bethany. I'm like, "Hey, by the way, my cousin is speaking at Trevecca." And she's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, I know her as Lori Marvel." She's like, Milo, that's Lori Salerno." And I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "No, like, that's your cousin?" And I was like, there's this little bit of like, "Yeah, she's my cousin." Like, you know what I mean? Sort of this thing.
Now I feel that way about Olivia and you.
But it's what I find interesting was like Bethany had no idea that but that was the kind of impact you were having on someone, like this very visceral, like, okay, I have a clear sense of what God has for me. And it was fun to hear that in general, but then to hear like, wait a minute, that's my family. Like, there's a sense of pride that comes along with that. And I know, you've had a road. It's Salerno-Maldonado now, and there's been a lot of things, and we're not going to necessarily get into all of that. But I remember being a little kid, and once a year, we would always, at minimum once a year, we would go up to your dad's church, in Vancouver, Washington, and go to the Singing Christmas Tree. And it was always the chance to connect with the Marvel side of the family. And it was good for us because your dad and my mom's dad are brothers. And my grandfather then, your uncle, he passed away before any of us were born. And so because of that sort of side of the Marvel family, I never had access to until we went up and visited you guys in Washington. And so for me, in my mind's eye, that like generation of Marvels, your dad, even Uncle Daryl, right? You, your brothers, Aunt Rena, like that generation has very much kind of ensconced in my mind as these folks that have always prioritized living for the Lord. And your dad did not have a small ministry. He had a pretty significant impact. And now your brothers have had a significant impact in ministry. You've had a significant impact in ministry. And so as we were kind of talking about what we could talk about in this podcast, you know, we could talk about Teach One to Lead One. We could talk about the 7 books you've written. We could talk about all the places you've traveled, which I think, like, you've probably done all of that with other people. I want to have the conversation that is like, hey, we're family. But I want to like not highlight the exceptions that people go, well, that's for them. I want to go, where's the line that God goes, I want that for every family. I want that spirit of adventure. I want that passion. I want that desire. I want that sort of tenacious discipline to sort of run deep in every family that prioritizes me. And so I'm just kind of setting the table for you. Like when you think of, when you look at your brothers, when you look at your ministry, when you look at, reflect on the ministry your dad had, like what are some of those nuggets that you kind of go, this has been sort of true to who we are as Marvels, as that source name. And then over time, that becomes true to who we are as Maldonados, right? That this is the thing we kind of hang on to and sort of defines our lives. I'll say it this way, and then I want you to respond. One of the things we've challenged ourselves as a family is, like, I'm in the military. So I have a Curtis is on my uniform, right? It's the name tape. And one of the things I challenged our kids with, and Bethany and I, is like, when a Curtis walks in the room, what should people expect? Like, what is that they should expect? What? How do we define that? So I share all that to say, like, how have you, like, reflected and thought about those things, and how has that shaped you along your journey to achieve an incredible amount in a relatively short period of time?
That is just such a great question. And when I think of family and looking at Olivia and you and just seeing the passing down of the different things that makes us a Marvel or makes us a Curtis or makes us any family, it's the culture of that family. And one of the things that I remember my dad saying to us 3 children is something similar to what you just said. When a Marvel comes into the room, what can they expect? Not that there's a performance, and it's not this idea that I've got to be something, but we're a family that I think the thing he passed down, my mom and dad passed down to me, that I think formed our culture of our family was our concept of God. You know, A.W. Tozer said that the most important thing about us is our concept of God. And so that concept starts when we're in the home. And so that is part of how did the Marvels see God?
It's funny you say that.
I literally was reading that chapter today.
Really?
On the plane.
What?
Yeah. No,
She has the book right there.
I literally, it's in my...
Knowledge of the Holy?
Yes.
Oh my
I was on the plane. I was like, the chapters are so small, I'll get it knocked out. I'm like spending 40 minutes trying to figure out what the heck he's saying. No, literally that was like your whole conception of God is how you're going to live your life. And it's like, if you see God as just a tool, he's only going to be a tool to you. But if you see God for who he really is without comparing him to something that you can visibly see and like tangibly like hold, like he's so outside of that. And the only thing we can depend on is how God characterizes himself.
Absolutely. And it determines everything about it. It's the most important thing. Because whether you come to him or not come to him, whether you, how you view people, how you view everything stems from that concept of God. And I think in the Marvel family, how that concept of God, and it's still evolving, it's still growing, it's still maturing, still sanctifying, if you will. But that was something that was very important in our family, is who God was. And how do we see him and grow in him? And that is something that's woven into the spiritual DNA of my life.
So in light of that, what have you learned, or you saw your dad do, your mom and dad do, and then you sort of picked up for yourself? What did you have to do to not just maintain that as the targeted objective, but also be on defense for the things that could water that down, make it fuzzy, make it less of a priority?
I think the thing that can make it less of a priority is taking a relationship and it go cross over into religion, and that there's rules and there's checkoff lists rather than a relationship that we're pursuing. There's nothing wrong with some of those things that the disciplines that were there in our lives, but it's when it crossed over from relationship to religion and kind of going back. Like, I can remember in 7th grade, my girlfriends were saying, Lori, we'd like to see what it looks like for you to be drunk. And I said, I will never do that. And they said, why not? I said, it would hurt God's feelings. And I remember thinking, I would never want to hurt God's feelings. See, that concept of God. Did
you have that answer sort of like prepped for you, or prepped in you, or were you, when you shared that, were you kind of surprised that that's like, I'm articulating the posture of my life in a very, like, in an unanticipated way?
Yeah, it surprised me. In fact, when I asked my mom, I'll say, Mom, how did I get that? How was I sensitive to what God would feel if I did something that was disobedient? And what was the culture of our home that created this desire to want to please him? Not out of fear, but out of, I would just not do that because that would hurt his feelings, that would hurt my reputation as a Christ follower. And this is 7th grade. And so the culture of the home was seen, really, actually, Olivia and Milo, I hit the jackpot, the lottery with parents. And they weren't perfect, but they were so intentional. Yeah. And so with that intentional relationship that I had with my dad, it translated into my concept of God. And I know some of my colleagues and some of my peers don't have a healthy relationship with their father. And so that concept of God is something that they're growing in. But one of the things that passed down in the Marvel family is the way that my father prioritized us as a family. And I was pretty feisty. And I remember he would say, Lori, we honor God's day, we honor God's pay, and we honor God's way. That's what the Marvels do. And so the honor God's day is the Sabbath, honor God's pay was the tithe, and honor God's way was the obedience to the word. And so just that right there is the word honor. It's not like you have to do this or you're in trouble, but we get to honor God in this way.
So we're living in, I'd say we're living in a cultural moment where we don't know how to honor, apart from agree. Like, if you agree with me, I can honor you, but if you don't agree with me, like the...
Respect and honor go hand in hand. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm not going to honor you if you're disrespectful.
Yeah, and we're culturally living in a place to where it's just... Yeah, anyway, we know where we're at. I think, when Paul writes in Romans, honor everyone, Paul's not writing from exactly an idealistic setting, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's under Roman, he's in prison by the Roman Empire, who is interested in snuffing out this thing called Christianity because it's a little bit of a nuisance. And so in light of that, like, what would you say to those folks that, like, hey, I love this. I don't come from an intact family, or I don't have an intact family. I've never really seen what it means to honor. I expect it. I don't know how to give it. Like, for those folks that kind of want to rewrite their family legacy, where do you suggest they begin in kind of going family culture? I don't even know what that means, right? Like, where's step one in all of that?
That's a great question. I don't want it to be a Sunday school answer.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't start in the Word of God, it will not be anchored in the eternal truth. And if we can go to the Word of God and find out what the Word of God and how it defines honor, how it defines respect, that's the beginning point. Then having a role model. Who do you see emulating that which you would like to have in your life? And that role model, like Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. That role model is a very important part of that. And so I think my father did not come from an intact family. They had trauma, they had tragedy. And so he didn't have that growing up. But what he did is he shifted it for my generation. And he saw first and foremost the Word of God, but he picked out role models of people that I think he watched them, asked them questions, and then, trial and error. I remember one time when my dad had a wrong call about me and my behavior, and he found out that I wasn't wrong, and he gave me his belt and said, "Spank me." Now, I know nowadays we don't spank kids, but I'm like, dude, I get to spank my dad. This is pretty awesome.
This is like upgrade.
But it was him saying, I made a mistake here. I'm going to shift it because our culture was we honor God's day, honor God's pay, and honor God's way. And God's way is respect. And I think it just starts with that, but it's not as easy as just saying, okay, go to the Word and get a role model, but it is a beginning and it's a start.
It's interesting you say that because there's have you seen the statistics that say like Bible sales are way up year over year, like highest Bible sales in 40 years or something like that?
Exactly.
In fact, I heard another, there's a lot of stuff coming out right now that contrasts 2019 to today, because it's like pre-COVID. What was life pre-COVID versus post-COVID? And I recently heard the statistic that said in 2019, your demographic, Olivia, of like 18 to, I think it was 28, 22% listened to Christian music. Okay. Last year, it was up to 48%.
Wow.
Okay, so I share that to say Bible sales are up. People are interested in worship, which is great. That doesn't automatically, I think it'd be easy like, oh, awesome, good work is going on. But my experience is there's a lot of folks that go, I'm listening to this, I have a Bible, I got it. I don't even know
what to do with it.
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into like where to begin in your Bible reading as much as it is like what is the posture of someone's heart that they need to take? Because it is not a very clear or an intuitive path at the beginning. Because you haven't been exposed to it, it's an unnatural way to start shaping the priorities of your life.
The posture would be, the first thing that comes to my mind, Cousin Milo, is humility. Is that teachability and that willingness to say, what do I need to do? What do I need to include in my life? What do I need to let go of? But where do I learn? Where do I grow? And that humility, when we approach whatever it is, the Word of God, the role model that we've picked, the fact that I want to create a family culture that is different than what I have experienced in the past, but we can't change the past, we can change our future type of thing. But it's that stance of humility, like my mom and dad admitting when they were wrong. And we saw that in our home. We also had strong guidelines, and we had a lot of laughter and a lot of music. There was just a lot of things that made up the Marvel culture, but ultimately it was the isness. And the isness, I get that from Matthew 5 when it says, you are salt, you are light. That word "are" in the Greek is the indicative, which is the reality of mood, and it's the present tense, which is a constant condition. So it's a continual reality. So grammatically it might not be true, but conceptually it is. You is light, you is salt. So you is a marvel. It's the isness. And that you approach that with humility, because when you have humility, then you can know how to respect, you know how to honor, or you can also admit a mistake or something that needs to be forgiven or changed.
No, yeah, like I completely agree with that. I also think like posture of humility, like how do you get there? Like especially like someone that wants to tap into that, like their humility might be different than how Christ calls us to be humble or like get to that place.
What do you mean?
Does that make do you know what I'm trying to ask?
No.
Of like
Maybe Lori does.
What I hear you saying is, how do you get to the place where you're exercising that?
Yes. See?
Yep.
It's the blood.
It's cousin,
the blood.
It's cousin vibes.
It's skipping a generation.
Hey, Olivia, we get each other.
Yeah, we
get
do.
each other. You know, that's a great question. The thing that comes to my mind, and just let me know how you receive this. What about the simple question, Lord, what are you saying to me? Just asking that simple question in every moment. In that moment, what is he saying to you? That in itself, that question and that posture of your heart, listening, receive, and then do, that's part of that humility.
That's good. Yeah.
You know, you were talking about starting a, what is that family culture like? Do you think there's because like you're, Olivia, you're not married.
No.
And your brother's not married. And we have a whole, it's interesting if you look at the demographic of the folks that listen to this, it's like 20s and it kind of drops off like in the mid 30s and it's sort of a trough until like the mid 40s and then it goes up again. They don't have families yet. So do you think it's a reasonable, or what would translate over or not translate over going like, okay, I'm not in a place to start my family culture, but I am in a place to start my friend culture. And that becomes a kind of an environment I can kind of experiment with some of these things. We can experiment with one another. How do we do this? Like, have you seen that? Or
I think the family grouping is their family. The friendship is a family. A church is a family. I guess my question to you, Milo, would be, how are you defining family? Is it just the bloodline, or is it the camaraderie, or is it the faith? Is it the peer group?
I think I would, candidly, there's Bethany. We talked about this at one time actually in our last podcast. It's for a period of time, we had to sort of fight the temptation to slip into us four and no more. And some of that is because of being in the military, you move around a lot. And so the folks that you would have considered close or friends, or you write them, you text them, and they're slow to reply because you're no longer in their sphere of awareness. And so the way I would define family, and feel free to push against this, is more kind of in that realm of these are people who I consistently think about and regularly think about and have immediate access to me, and I have immediate access to them. And I think that's a
kind of doing life with.
Could be doing life with, but it could also be like I talked to my sister today.
Okay.
She called me out of the blue about some things, and it's like I didn't have to go like, oh, am I going to take this call or not? It's like it's my sister. Like, of course I'm going to take this call. It's family. Do you know what I mean? Yet there's other folks that I would kind of like, this can probably wait till I get back from Virginia because right now I'm spending it with
family.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And so I think there has to be some of this. There's some folks that sort of, I'm going to prioritize my time for, my affections for, not to be exclusionary as much as it is just to be, and because these are the people I can be weak in front of as well, right? I can be vulnerable with. I can, like you talked about that story with your dad, I can admit my mistakes to. So I think that's a big part of family. And so that's where I just kind of hesitate to kind of like, could it be all these other things?
But what about the person whose family is not intact and it's not healthy? What do they do?
Yeah, well, and that's where I think, who's that friend group then that practically they hit those wickets, right? That they have access to me 24/7. I have access to them. I can be weak and vulnerable. I can be, they know my strengths and weaknesses. There's this thing we kind of talk about where community, like you're tight with someone when you've experienced three things: head to head, shoulder to shoulder, heart to heart. So head to head is like we've learned something with one another. Shoulder to shoulder is we've we've done something with one another. But then heart to heart is where we've shared, like, you know my dreams and my ambitions, you know my hurts and my sorrows.
That's good.
And oftentimes you can find maybe one person that covers two of those areas, but rarely will you find somebody that covers all three of those areas. And if you do, that's probably on your best friends list,
Yeah.
right? When you think of your growing up, those are the people that I go, that's my best friend. Because they know where I've come from. They know my hurts and my sorrows. We've done things with one another, and we've learned a lot with one another. I've experienced that in many regards with the military in a really truncated period of time. But because the experience was so intense, like there's guys that I could text right now, and I know they would reply. Because
Well, could it be something that if a person has a family that's not intact, that they could work toward healing with the help of the Lord, to say, Lord, help me with the head-to-head, shoulder-to-shoulder, heart-to-heart, as they're growing in that with their bloodline, that they're having a support group with them at the same
absolutely.
time. And I think doing both, not just throwing out the family because it's not intact, but going toward that healing, but at the same time having the support. Kind of like what you were saying, Olivia, when you moved to where you are in Virginia, one of the things you said to me is, I'm going to get a support group because my dad is on a ship in the middle of the ocean. So it's still the bloodline there, but you also had some kind of a family feel. And I hear what you're saying. Don't make every community your family, but I love that head to head, and then shoulder to shoulder, heart to heart.
Yeah. And it has to start from a place of like, not a hardened heart when you step into that realm of looking. Because I know, like, I mean, I felt when we did our first move, I was so discouraged. I was so upset. I got a job so I could raise money to move back to Oregon. Like, I was so, like, headstrong and determined that I do not like this. But, like, the Lord really, like, had to, like, break that. And because he broke it, like, then I was able to, like, be like, okay, now I get to experience his grace and not just in my head and being stubborn, and experience the community God wants, that he has for me. And, like, I remember, like, there are times when we do a transition, and either I'd be at a place of, okay, now I need to learn, or now I need to teach. So I would pray, like, Lord, who do I need to learn from, who's older and wiser, and who do I need to teach that's younger and needs, like, help, not necessarily maturing, but how can I continue that growth? And he definitely gives me those people every move. Sometimes it's just I'm learning, which sometimes I'm like, Lord, I'm ready at a place of teaching, you know? Who am I going to teach? And he's like, well, okay, we need to, like, cross 2 more boxes. And I'm like, no, I'm ready. Let me shade him in real quick. So, like, that's not what I want.
But Olivia, that's humility right there.
Right.
yeah, that's a good point.
I keep going back to this thought, like, this week, or to add to this, we're about to be at a place where my parents might possibly, it's more leaning towards they're moving away. So usually I'm 20 minutes from home. So, like, I live both sides. I have my friend group at college, and then I come home to see family. But once that's gone, it's like, okay, Lord, who's my family? Like, I've not been I've not been seeking that because I have them. But now it's like, okay, Lord, open my eyes. Like, I need your Holy Spirit to guide me to the people that like I need. And I'm a part of this ministry at our college, and it's called Forerunners, and we're the Forerunners for Christ.
Oh, wow.
And there's maybe about 30 of us that meet regularly every other week, and we're walking through the tabernacle. And hopefully we'll do a series on that, hopefully very soon.
Yeah, we're working on it.
And basically it talks about, okay, what was the significance of the tabernacle? Because that was like divine instruction from the Lord on how it was supposed to be made. And the presence of God and like the instruction, and it was super like specific. So how can we use those principles in our walk with God? Like, what's the gate? Good. What's the altar? What's the laver? And so this last week we were talking about the menorah. And you hear the menorah and you're like, Hanukkah, and move on, you know? And our professor was just kind of going, he was like, not like the tabernacle is a huge symbol. So each of them have a symbol. And the menorah comes from, well, it's a big block of gold that's can only be molded under heat and pressure. and it's made from one block, so it starts at the stem, and then it does the branches. If you don't know what a menorah looks like, it has 7 little tops, 3 on each side and 1 right in the middle. And he references the part when Jesus says, I am the branch and you are the vines. And or he's the vine, we are the branches, and abiding in God. And to go to your humility and to be able to teach him, to be able to be not only a servant but a participant in a family, we have to abide in him to experience the people that he wants us to experience.
Olivia, I love that because you're describing the family of God and the abiding. And, in the Greek, the abiding means to be at home with. And you're talking about where you can be comfortable, where you can, when we go home, we're really comfortable there. That's where you can have bad breath. You can have your pajamas on. It's your comfort. And Jesus says, I want you to be at home in me. And what I hear you saying is when your mom and dad move off, who will be my family? And even when you moved to Virginia, you talked about how the church showed up. Yeah. And so the ultimate family is the family of God. And I love the fact that we're here as family. But if someone doesn't have an intact family, there is a family to be had in the body of Christ because we're the family of God with the same Father.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that we've been... there's been times in our lives I think it's been easier to cling to than others, but I earnestly believe that God desires for everybody to be in community.
Absolutely.
In the way we're talking about it, right? In this way that these folks have access to some of the most intimate parts of my life that I wouldn't be public facing with because it would be inappropriate and, self-aggrandizing or would draw unnecessary attention. And so there's this, how do I get that? And I think for a lot of folks, it's a scary thing to step into, and it's not something that is culturally intuitive to step into because we have a tendency to live in a very
individualistic
and I always forget the word, but sort of like if you give me something, I give you something. Like what are you in this for, and am I going to be able to meet that expectation? And so there's this kind of transactional. That's what I mean. We live in a very transactional culture, and the kind of community we're talking about is not transactional at all. At all. Like that's not if anybody's getting a big head because their quote unquote group is growing, that's what they're getting at. It's like, whoa, time out. That's not the function of this group. That's not the point of this gathering for anybody to feel better about themselves, or in the invert places, for anybody to feel worse about themselves. Show up and I don't know if I can fit in around here because I don't have whatever.
Yeah.
So, Milo, is there a difference in your mind between community and family? I know we're talking about the biological family. We're talking about the family of God. We've talked about that culture. Help me understand the difference.
I think there's let me maybe be a little bit more articulate. I think there's I can't remember the author's name there, but he talked about there's the celebration size, congregation size, and cell size. Did you ever come across that reading for group sizes within a church dynamic? So the celebration size is probably any gathering that's going to be more than 800 folks. It's just, you're there to celebrate, right? Next below that is your congregational size, which is going to be below that threshold of 800. I think it's 800, and then down to maybe maybe 60 people. And this is folks where people would know my name, they would know if I wasn't there, that kind of thing. But then that cell group size those are the folks that they have those kind of 3 things, right? And I think the church can be experienced in all 3 of those sizes. And I think where people have misaligned expectations is where they expect things that take place in the cell group when they show up at the celebration.
Okay.
Right? Or they expect things, kind of we know one another enough that you would expect at the congregational size, and that's all they want in the cell group size. I don't want people getting in my business. I don't, everything fine? Everything's fine. Anything we can pray for? No, everything's good. You know what I mean? It's all right, because
it takes humility and vulnerability to be in that cell group.
Yeah. Okay, so family culture stuff. for you, so you picked some of that stuff up. Mm-hmm. You got that from your family. And we could probably go down a list of a bunch of other things you picked up from that kind of family. But over the years, like, you've picked up things from other folks that have shaped you, who you are. You mentioned Mother Teresa was a massive influence on your life. Like, how did you go about sort of curating, as it were, where am I going to look for because not every family is going to give me everything I need to accomplish what God has for me. Some families, you said you came from a great household. I can attest to that, right? I always loved to go on Uncle Jared and Aunt Rena's house because they usually had a gift for me.
My dad probably gave you one of his knives. He would love to give knives.
Would. Yeah. So, when you're real little, that's like a pretty low threshold to hit. But, the family dynamics as they are, there's always going to be gaps. Like you and your brother, you're going to have gaps in your life because your mom and I we're not covering all the bases, right? Yeah. And so you need to be able to figure out how you're going to cover those other gaps. So for you, what have you learned about that? Like, how to curate, honoring where I've come from, but at the same time, bringing in other influences to further shape my understanding of who I am in God, who God is, how I live out his call in my life, what it means to approach his word and apply it so I can live with greater clarity. Like, how have you thought about going through that process of curating those influences?
Well, thank you for asking that. As healthy as I believe our family was, we were far apart from family. We didn't have a lot of close family. And so as a result of that, that's where it started young, when I didn't have my grandparents close to me. And I felt it. I go to school, everybody had their grandparents. I didn't have my grandparents close to me. So my mom and dad says, find someone in the church that you want to adopt as a grandparent. They don't take the place of your grandparents, but they are someone that you can go to here in the present. Well, that's when I started looking at how to fill that gap. And I literally looked in the church and found a couple. I want them to be my grandparent. And then I go up and just say, would you be my grandparent? Because my grandparents live far away. And those people said yes. And all the way till their death, they had a very special relationship with me wherever we moved to. But one of the things...
What were their names?
Everett and Vi Jensen, Fred and Mary Hall were two of the ones that were just... And they would come to my ball games, my cheerleading, my recitals. I mean, they were there. They took that responsibility. Well, I drafted up a little adoption papers.
Of course you did.
I adopt Lori Marble as my grandchild because her grandparents are far away. And so I had them sign it, and I told them I would frame it for them if they wanted, so on. But what it did for me was finding people who bridged that gap so that my family was complete in what I needed. And even to this day, the coaches that I have, if someone could say, well, I don't have anyone that I feel like I could have as a role model, or well, then get a dead mentor. Someone who has written a book, a biography, and let them fill in some of those gaps. I read biographies all the time of missionaries and women who've done significant things, or people who inspire me. I call them dead mentors. And those mentors are still mentoring me long after they're gone.
Who's at the top of that list for you right now?
Well, for a while it was Mother Teresa, and but she wasn't dead at the time.
Yeah.
But I would say Mary Slessor, the Presbyterian missionary, Scottish missionary that went to Africa, and how she changed the culture of Africa. And I've read her biography 2 or 3 different times. George Mueller, how he did the orphans when I was doing Teach One Lee One. How did he run his orphanages? And looking at Martin Luther, somebody looked at his prayer life. And these different people, you can gain as much, I guess, wisdom and fortification, if you will, in your life by people who are present. But even those who have gone on and have left a biography or a book is Abraham Lincoln. How he took our country and what he did to bring inspiration to me. I'm a learner. I'm constantly reading and I'm constantly learning. And what I've done is the difference between fulfillment and achievement. And that is be fulfilled in the present, but be hungry to continue to achieve. And that's what I've learned from those people in my life. And having you and Olivia in my home, oh my goodness. We haven't lived close by each other. And when we did live close by, Milo, what in the world? Why didn't we get together? I have no idea. Probably my fault more than yours. But just having you here, it's just so rich. And I think it may not be perfect. It may not be completely cohesive, meaning it's just around all the time. But take what you have in the present, fortify it with resources around you like different people. And then when you get a chance to bring a more depth to your biological family, you go for it.
I really like that idea of familiarizing yourself with folks in church history that have made an impact for the kingdom, even if it's not entirely clear how, like you're not a missionary to Africa. Right.
But they have transferable principles.
Okay, but that's my point. And I think also not only do they have transferable principles, but they have transferable trials, right? That you can look at it and go, wow, they also faced these insecurities. They also faced this, rejection. They also faced this lack of confidence. They also faced, whatever it is. And if that was true 50 years ago, 75 years ago, 150 years ago, 200, okay, then this tells us this is the landscape of humanity in which we operate. And so what I'm going through, the Lord has a path for. And what are not only those, obviously, what are the transferable principles I can pull over, but then I can also, if I know what the transferable obstacles are, or temptations or whatever they are, in some ways, it's sort of the cheat code for knowing how to anticipate how the enemy is going to come against you, right?
Exactly.
Like, I know this tactic. I know how he operates because that's a really...
But Cousin Milo, that voice is in your life. When you read that, you find the transferable trials or the transferable things that have helped. That's a voice in your life now, a voice that can fortify... I guess we were talking about families, but fortify the culture of who you are so that when you come back to your family, you bring that with you. You bring those voices, that fortification. When you go to your family of origin, you bring that with you.
So we're going to press pause on today's episode so far. I know meeting with Cousin Lori, we didn't know how far we were going to go, but we had a great conversation.
When we sat down with her, we didn't really have a game plan.
No.
Other than...
I was flying all day, and I was finishing up midterms, so my focus going into this was very minimal. And we knew Cousin Lori. Like, I've never really sat down and had a conversation with her like this, in this kind of setting, and getting into theological stuff, per se. Usually it's just meet and greets, but I think it was super valuable for us to have gotten to cherish this time with her. It
was a tremendous opportunity. And so want to say thank you to Lori for the opportunity to be able to sit down with her and pick her brain and just kind of talk about, this aspect of family and family culture and what it looks like to live in pursuit of God. So the second half of our conversation with her is going to come out next week. And hopefully this was an encouragement. This is it's a lot different format than what we would typically do. But hopefully it's been a blessing to others.
Yep. So you guys can follow, rate, and review this podcast. If you guys want to look at our website, go to thisresilientsoul.com. We have all of our podcasts updated, and if you click on any icon, it will take you straight to the show. You guys can also email us at what is it?
Hello
at thisresilientsoul, right? At Gmail? I don't know.
hello@thisresilientsoul.com.
Okay, you can email us there. And see, we say it every week.
You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, x.com. Just look up Milo Curtis.
And then you can follow me at Olivia Curtis on Facebook and Olivia.grace_28 on Instagram.
We're on TikTok too.
Yeah,
right? You manage that.
Resilient Lineage podcast.
Yeah. So we look forward to catching up with you guys next week when we resume our conversation with Lori. In the meantime, we hope you have a great week, and thanks for listening.